to Golden Bloated, everybody. And if you are a college football fan, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. That is all we do here every single day. And send gear to represent your team and yourself to Golden Bloated. I guarantee you, if you send it to me, I will put it in my background. Send your gear to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29657. Wow, it has been an entire week since I've talked about conference realignment. That is unacceptable here at Golden Bloated. And yes, I realize it's the regular season, and that's why I make about 20 other videos about the regular season. But I try to stay on top of this conference realignment. I've made well over 100 videos. Some of those scenarios have to happen. I've tried to cover every stinking base. Well, I thought of a few more scenarios today that I thought I would cover, and they do seem plausible. Okay, so the three things that we know right now is that the Big Ten and the SEC, they're not done expanding. Okay, they have made that perfectly clear, especially the Big Ten. Kevin Warren says that they're going for 24. And if the Big Ten is going to go for 24, you better believe your sweet bottom that the SEC is going to try to get to 24 teams as well. That's just how it goes. Now, the other fact that we know is right now the grant of rights is locked in for the ACC. They are locked into those grant of rights till 2036, unless they can get 8 teams to vote to basically disintegrate the ACC. Then those grant of rights are null and void. So maybe that's not as certain as what we think, but as of right now, this moment in time, as the making of this video, the grant of rights are locked in and the ACC still exists. So the two conferences that are in the biggest uncertainty period right now is the Pac-12 and the Big 12. Pac-12 is in a whole lot more trouble than the Big 12. Here's the thing. The one thing that's concerning everybody is that the Pac-12 and the Big 12 aren't making any moves right now. And the only thing that makes sense to me is they know something about the ACC. Maybe they already know that 8 teams will vote to dissolve the ACC. Maybe they know that and they're biding their time. And I think it would be much more profitable for the Big 12 to go after teams from the ACC rather than teams from the Pac-12. They need to strengthen their east side more than their west side. So if that's the case, then the rest of this video is going to be irrelevant. But we don't know that for sure. So that's why I came up with these other ideas as far as what the Pac-12 or the Big 12 should do going forward. And honestly, if the ACC does dissolve, in spite of all the reports that we heard, I think the SEC would get these 4 teams: North Carolina, Duke, Florida State, and Clemson, not Virginia. And I think the Big Ten would get Virginia, Virginia Tech, Miami, and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech makes sense because they would fit in academically, and it gives them a footprint in the state of Georgia and a great recruiting base in the city of Atlanta. So out of the teams that remain from the dissolved ACC, the Big 12 should get Pitt, Louisville, Syracuse, and NC State. Those are the 4 best remaining brands, and they would bring you the most money, and you'd have some great rivalries. And the backyard brawl would bring in a ton of money for the Big 12. However, if none of that happens, here are a few ideas that I came up with as far as what the Pac-12 or the Big 12 should do. Number 1, they must keep Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Cal, Stanford, Washington State, and Oregon State. Notice that I didn't say Oregon and Washington. I do think eventually that Oregon and Washington will head on over to the Big Ten. I know the antitrust lawsuits and all that stuff could keep that from happening. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But let's say they go on to the Big Ten. Keep all these other teams. You have to. If you want to keep Power 5 status, you have to keep those teams and then add on to it. That's the bottom line. That's 8 decent brands, Power 5 brands, and there's other brands either in the Mountain West or maybe the AAC that you can add with them and stay relevant. But those are must-keeps for the Pac-12. Now, for the Big 12, it's the other way around. You must get Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, and not Colorado, Washington State. And I know it's a great selling point, the 4 corners. That's a great selling point. I have to admit that. But Colorado isn't worth anything right now. They are in shambles. They're not bringing in a lot of revenue. Their stadium is actually really small. Their TV viewership is downright terrible. Colorado isn't worth anything. When you bring in Colorado, all you're doing is bringing in somebody that you're going to have to slice the pie another piece for them. You're not adding to the pie. Washington State, and look it up. Tony Altomare actually did a presentation on the fan bases in the Pac-12, and Washington State is actually a top 20 national fan base in terms of size. They have a much bigger fan base than people realize. That's why I took out Colorado and pulled in Washington State. Colorado isn't going to do the Big 12 any type of good whatsoever. I mean, it's all about money right now, right? It's all about money. Colorado's not going to help the Big 12 as far as money goes. So bringing Washington State in with Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State. And I do know that Arizona and Arizona State, those two are also debatable. But if you compare them to Colorado, yeah, there's no question about it. They are bigger brands. And you can make a case for Stanford as well. But I don't think the Big 12 has any shot whatsoever to get Stanford. Stanford's either going to go to the Big 10 or they're going to go independent. That's their two options. Or if the Pac-12 can stay intact and retain Power 5 status, they might stay in the Pac-12. They're not coming to the Big 12. It's not happening. And if it's a way to attract Notre Dame into the Big 10, then the Big 10 will bring in Stanford. But they're going to make sure that Notre Dame will 100% join before they bring in Stanford. So that's a whole different situation. But going to the Big 12, not an option. So it is going to be Arizona, Arizona State, Utah. Unfortunately, it probably will be Colorado. But I think that's a big mistake. I think you bring in Washington State. Washington State will bring in more money and viewers, and it gives you an extra time slot. Washington State is Pacific time, so you already have Mountain Time locked down. Then you can add Pacific time as well. And it's a great brand. I know it's a slight gamble, but I think Washington State is worth that slight gamble because they have a great fan base. They have great support. I know their stadium is small, and that baffles me. Maybe it's because of their location, but they could definitely fill a 65 to 70,000 seat stadium consistently if they wanted to. Washington State over Colorado for the Big 12. Remember that. Now, as far as adding teams from the group of 5, there are some names out there that would keep either the Pac-12 or the Big 12 from totally being irrelevant and losing Power 5 status. From the Mountain West, number 1 has to be Boise State. I know Boise State got turned down from the Pac-12 because of their academics, and it is what it is. That could be a big mistake on the part of the Pac-12, but there's always the Big 12. Now, the thing that's hurt Boise State is recent rumors that the Pac-12 could be losing Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado to the Big 12. So that would put Boise State from the top of the list down to the bottom of the list because the Big 12 would much prefer those teams out of the Pac-12 over Boise State. But I would say that Boise State is still a pretty good option. And if you don't want to bring in Washington State because they're too far, instead of Colorado, I would bring in Boise State. That's how bad Colorado is right now. Boise State has a bigger fan base, bigger viewership. I know they're a little bit more remote than Colorado, but hey, at least it's still within striking distance as far as the core of the Big 12 goes. I think bringing Boise State in over Colorado would be a smart decision. And right now, the Pac-12 might have to swallow their pride of academics and bring in Boise State anyways, because they would bring in some money. But besides Boise State, oh, and by the way, Boise State is pouring some money into their facilities, and they're only expanding their stadium by 3,000, but it's an important mark, from 36,000 something to 40,000, and 40,000 is the minimum that your stadium must seat once the new Big 12 gets kicked off. And that will apply to Houston, and Houston's going to take care of that. I know that argument's going to pop up, but 40,000 is going to be the threshold, and it's kind of coincidental that Boise State is raising capacity up to 40,000. That's very interesting. It seems like they know something, maybe. Who knows? But also, they announced that before we heard that the Pac-12 could be crumbling. So are they doing that for nothing? No, not necessarily. It still helps your brand, but their ticket to the Big 12 might be ripped in two because of the Pac-12. However, Boise State's still a great brand, worth a consideration. Other brands in the Mountain West, I'd say Fresno State. Fresno State has been building their brand. They have a great location. They have one of the bigger fan bases as far as the group of 5 California schools. Right now, they have better support than Cal and Stanford in football. So Fresno State would bring in some money. San Diego State. I know they're not having a great year this year, but they just built a new football stadium. They're showing everybody, hey, we are willing to pour in money. Give us a chance. And I think they would be worth a shot. What about Colorado State? The only way that I would bring in Colorado State is to replace Colorado. That's it. Otherwise, I don't think they bring in anything. But I would put Boise State and definitely Washington State over Colorado State. If you're not considering those two, then Colorado State over Colorado. Yeah, that's how bad it is. Nevada. Nevada's worth a look into. I think they have potential, and that gives you a spot in the state of Nevada. You could go after either a Nevada or a UNLV, but the fan support for UNLV is in the crapper. Great potential, but the fan base just doesn't care. So I would take Nevada over UNLV. What about teams out of the AAC? Number 1 has to be Memphis. Memphis is doing a $200 million renovation into the Liberty Bowl. They are showing the Power 5 conferences, hey, We want to play with the big boys, and Memphis has a backing by FedEx, so even that helps, and they have a decent fan base. As far as the remaining brands left in the group of 5, Memphis could be numero uno, especially after the renovation. And I think for the Big 12, it's especially important because that would help Cincinnati, West Virginia, and UCF as far as travel goes. I really, really hope that the Big 12 considers Memphis. That would help out the east side of the conference, and that's what needs help the most right now. Other brands, Tulane. Tulane's okay, but they still have a lot of work to do, but still worth a consideration. Navy. I think Navy is definitely worth a consideration. Bringing Navy and Memphis together. I like that combo. You help the east side. Navy is a military academy, so they always get great support. Plus, you're getting the rivalry between Navy and Notre Dame every year, even if Notre Dame doesn't join the Big 12. But who knows? Maybe that could slightly help attract Notre Dame to the Big 12. Remember, Notre Dame is a part of this equation as well. They could stay independent forever or eventually join a conference. The question is, who will be able to lure them in? Last two brands, SMU. They're a good brand, but you already have several brands in the state of Texas, so I'm not sure if it's even worth pursuing at this point. And then there's FAU. You have UCF. You would give them a great travel partner because, let's face it, UCF is the farthest away from everybody. Yes, they have West Virginia and Cincinnati, but even that is a great distance. So I think bringing in FAU or USF, I've heard a lot of people talk about USF, would help the situation with UCF being in the Big 12. So y'all let me know in the comments section. Number 1, who do you think lasts longer, the Pac-12 or the Big 12? Number 2, do you think the ACC dissolves? If so, what teams go where? And number 3, do you think these group of 5 teams have any shot of becoming a Power 5 member? That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.